Well, thank you, friends. Shabbat Shalom and greetings to you all. Happy New Year to you all. It's a fascinating holiday. It's a personal favorite, not because of the reveling. You know, the Jewish calendar provides other holidays for revel days, the most obvious being Purim. And even though Purim, you know, with the people dressing up, and so they liken it to Halloween, it's really about festive celebration and imbibing. So it is actually much more like New Year's than Halloween. But I like not Halloween. I like New Year's because it's a day celebrating. Oh, I hear the dogs. They have a lot to say. It's a day celebrating a different type of significant event. No one not marked by any celestial event that would normally ever be used to mark time. And not one that you're going to find an awful lot of Hallmark cards for. A true testament to man's ability to determine destiny and to perpetuate one of the great illusions of truth. And of course, New Year's always goes hand in hand with making resolutions that will either be forgotten or not achieved. And instead of making resolutions for the coming year, as you approach the start of a new year, whenever you mark one, reflect back on the past one to see how you have grown and what issues still block your way to a deeper transformation. Has there been a theme during this past year? Do you see a pattern for your future challenges? Too many resolutions like the all go to the gym or all eat healthier fall by the wayside much too quickly. And all they do is provide another stick for you to hit yourself with. You say you want a resolution. We all want to change the world. I couldn't help myself there. So you have a fantastic new year. Reflect on your internal changes, your growth. And friends, keep up the great work. You are all holy, and you're all in my prayers. And Neen, I pray for you every day. You are never far from my thoughts, my heart, my soul. Have a sweet year. Now, the natives of Central and South America take fruit like grapes, and they make 12 wishes for the year ahead, one for each month. They focus on a wish and eat a grape. I do this every year myself, and you may surprise yourself at how hard 12 wishes can be to formulate. And I certainly, one of the wishes I would make for all of us would be for greater coherence and unity. And if we can't find that between the branches of a religion, how can we between religions? Well, I can't speak to Sunni and Shiite, Catholic, Anglican, and Protestant. I would love to see a greater understanding and connection between Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and Reconstructionists. And while that's not necessarily on the horizon, I would love to see the conservative movement change their views of two critically important items. Allow clergy to officiate interfaith life cycles, and finalize the decision to allow the conservative youth, who are all members of the USY, the United Synagogue Youth, to interdate. Up until now, it was forbidden in their rules and regulations. And friends, that is archaic. In 1969, CTA, the Chicago Transit Authority, the band, not the Transit Authority, released their brilliant debut album. I can almost remember like it was yesterday. And in it they used the chant from protests at the Democratic National Convention 1 year earlier. The whole world is watching. Then it was by newscast, but now the whole world truly is watching via social media, electronic spying, and the global village that we live in. So watch what you do. The whole world is watching, and the times they are a-changing, and we have to change with them. How apropos that the end of the year reading is the last parsha of Genesis. How neat that it all tied together like that. As we begin the transition, my friends, from the descent of man's soul to the beginning of his attempted resurrection. This, my friends, is Vayechi, and he lived. This is the end of the book of Genesis. We have the death of Jacob, the death of Joseph, and with it, a temporary death of the dream. As John Lennon so wonderfully put it in his song, God. The dream is over. What can I say? The dream is over yesterday. I was the dream weaver, but now I'm reborn. and we all continue to weave the dreams of our lives. And friends, never stop dreaming. We're witness to one of the most remarkable of all man's accomplishments in this parsha, Joseph's forgiveness of his brothers. Friends, the act of forgiveness is truly one of, if not the most healing of all activities. And yet, it is the one we find the hardest to do. We have even built a holy day around it, and it has become the holiest day of the year. Well, we call Yom Kippur the Day of Atonement. It is a day of forgiveness. Forgiveness of self, forgiveness of those around us. Forgiveness is good in and of itself. It is a moral virtue, and it helps us to greater emotional health. It promotes self-esteem and a positive outlook on life. It's something we should all work to practice. And if you thought the song of Moses at the end of Deuteronomy was strange, the blessing of Jacob to his sons in the opening of this, the ending parsha, is something else. As strange as it is, what is agreed among scholars is this is one of the oldest extended texts in the Bible. And yet, in two instances, there is no agreement whatsoever among all the translators and commentators about whether the language refers to animal, vegetable, or mineral. Ah, yes, friends, the world of translation and interpretation. How well can you trust what you are reading? When you read it, you will shake your head. It is presented as a prediction of what will happen to each of them and their tribes, and it is put across as a blessing of the sons of Jacob. Reuben is described as unstable as water. He defiled his father's bed, which is a reference to his sleeping with Jacob's concubine. Simeon and Levi, violent. They use weapons of outrage. Maybe today they would say they use weapons of mass destruction. They were the architects of the Shechem slaughter, which Jacob disliked not because of their defending Dinah, but because he felt it left him in a weaker position. So right away you can see that Jacob's testament to his first three sons has actually been nothing but curses. There's no blessing here. Judah is raised from fourth to first and told that all kings will come from him. Zebulun and Issachar are basically described as hard-working servants, and Dan will be a snake of a judge. Pretty amazing blessings for his kids, and it continues like this. And then he gets to Joseph, who will be blessed by El Shaddai. And it's interesting to see that throughout his life, Jacob used the older form for God. The Yahweh name, the Yud-Hey, Vav-Hey, although we had seen it in the Torah as we read it, we will be told later that Moses was the first to know that it was God's name. So perhaps it was only in editing that it was shown that way in the Torah. Friends, this is some blessing, some reading of the will, so to speak. And I'm sure his sons sat there and said, thanks, but no thanks. It is a fascinating read, my friends. Jacob is a dying man. He's been living in Egypt 17 years now, and he calls Joseph to make a deathbed promise about burying him at the family tomb in Hebron. So if you had any doubts about the promise of Abraham's servant earlier, when Abraham was sending him off to find a wife for Isaac, you need not. The description of the hands and the thighs confirm that that too was a deathbed promise. So Abraham was dying at that time. And the nature of the man has not really changed in all these years. His thoughts are still about himself. And interestingly, first he changes the wording of God's promise, and then he takes Joseph's sons as his own to replace Reuben and Simeon. Genesis 48:5. And now, your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt by my arrival to you in Egypt, they're mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be like Reuben and Simeon to me. And he uses the words that became the famous words used in the ancient Hebrew adoption ceremony. And friends, just to remind us that we know that karma stays around, When blessing these two sons of Joseph, we have an oops, and a fantastic mirror is held up for us to look at. When Isaac had been old, on his deathbed, unable to see, Jacob had come and appropriated his brother Esau's blessing. Now Jacob himself is old, on his deathbed, unable to see, and he favors the younger son, Ephraim, in his blessing. And so we have a thematic picture of the book of Genesis. The right hand of the father conferring the blessing reaches across to embrace the head of the younger brother, and the elder, his head covered by the old man's left hand, receives a lesser blessing. The wheels on the bus go round and round. Friends, Jacob wants to be buried in Israel, and Joseph has the full embalming and death rites performed. And what is described is actually the process carried out only for a person of Egyptian royalty, which further begs the question, who were these people and what was the relationship between Pharaoh and them? Genesis 57 tells us, and Joseph went up to bury his father, and all of Pharaoh's servants, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt. And both chariots and horsemen went up with him. It was a very heavy camp. And they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is across the Jordan. And they had a very big and heavy funeral, and he made a mourning for his father for 7 days. And the Canaanite natives of the land saw the mourning in Goren Ha-Atad, and they said, "This heavy mourning is Egypt's." Wow, this is some fascinating relationship. Don't forget what Joseph had said. He was made father to Pharaoh. We've not had any scheming of late. So with Jacob dead, the brothers then thought, if Joseph will despise us, he'll pay us back all the bad that we had dealt to him. Fear, guilt, the legacy of our conscience. As once more the brothers feel guilt and fear. Once more Joseph weeps because of them. Once more they offer to become his slaves as the physical act of prostration carries us back full circle to Joseph's two dreams at the beginning of the story. So what do the brothers do? They do what they have learned to do best. They lie. They claim that Jacob commanded that Joseph should forgive them. Now, technically, we do not know if they're making this up or not. But either way, it is the right message. After a parent's death, the children should come together and try to heal any old wounds and draw close. They should try and do this before the parent's death, but often it is the death of the parent that is the triggering mechanism. Joseph says to them in Genesis 50:20, "While you meant evil toward me, God meant it for good, so as to bring about at this very time, keeping many people alive. So fear not, I will sustain you and your little ones." And he comforted them and spoke to their hearts. They didn't have to fear. Talk about growth. But it's too late to say you're sorry. How would I know? Why should I care? Please don't bother trying to find her. She's not there. But friends, it's never too late to either say you are sorry or to grant forgiveness. And interestingly enough, the brothers never do say they are sorry. They simply say that Jacob said Joseph should forgive them. We have seen that each act of deception since Jacob has led to another deception that came as recompense. Thus, deceptions and hurts within a family can go on in a perpetual cycle. In order to bring it to an end, one member of the family who is entitled to retribution must stop the cycle and forgive instead. That is what Joseph does here. Joseph dies, he's put in a coffin in Egypt, and the book that began with an image of God's breath moving across the vast expanses of the primordial deep to bring the world and all life into being ends with this image of a body in a box, a mummy in a coffin. Time to say goodbye. Now it's time to say good night, sleep tight. Friends, let us all join together to say goodbye to this year and welcome in the next. And I think of that incredible song, You Can't Stop the Music, from the Kinks' amazing soap opera album. Let's all raise a glass to the rock stars of the past, those that made it and those that faded, those that never even made the grade, those that we thought would never last. Let us raise a glass and say L'chaim. Thank you all for joining me, my friends. Love you all. See the miracles in your life. Be well, be happy, and be blessed. Share and honor the light and shine on brightly. Have a wonderful new year, and peace be with you. Thank you. See you all next time. Shabbat Shalom. Drive carefully. Be well.